Welcome to the Tuesday, February 4th City Council meeting. We start with a roll call.
Councilmember Penrose. Councilmember Rohrback.
Here.
Councilmember Ruddick.
Here.
Vice Mayor Brunson.
Here.
Mayor Eisen.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Excellent. Can we move on to the Pledge of Allegiance? Everybody please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
States of America, and the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible,
All right, I would like to open up the evening tonight for the public forum. This is time for the public to come up and talk about any items that are not on the agenda for the evening. And just note up here, there is a little, let's call it a timer. And it starts off with green, and when it goes to yellow, how much time do you have left when there's yellow, Jonathan?
30 seconds.
30 seconds left. And so after that, it goes to red. Your time is then up. I will ask you to stop talking at that point, and we'll move on to the next public forum person. Jonathan, take us away.
We have Keishan Prathvadi, followed by Scott McVicker.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, staff, and public. My name is Kishan Prathvadi, and I'm the General Manager for Sewer Authority Mid-Coast Side. We serve the communities of City of Half Moon Bay, Montara, El Granada, Princeton, Mounts Beach, and Miramar. Our average flow is about 1.5 to 2 million gallons per day. And I'm here to invite you all for a free tour of the wastewater treatment plant. We conduct this tour every third Wednesday of the month, and this is at 11 o'clock in the morning. It's about 1 hour. The tour is for about 1 hour, and at the same time, we would also educate you as to what to flush, what not to flush, and what happens to the sewer all along once it leaves your home, till it reaches the treatment plant. So please grab this opportunity and come on to the tour, and in case the third Wednesday of the month does not work for any of you, please give us a call, and we can definitely accommodate you any other day, any other time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilwoman Penrose.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I've taken the tour myself, and it's amazing. It is a very complicated process, and the guys at the plant do a great job at explaining exactly how things work. So I think it's a worthwhile hour.
I've also taken a tour, and I concur.
I also took the tour, and I brought the family with me too, because I wanted them to learn about it. I loved it. I thought it was a great experience, so thank you so much for that opportunity.
We have another public forum comment from Joaquin Jimenez.
Good evening. Well, to make a few comments about some of the things that have happened, since this year. Our last meeting, we talked about minimum wage in Half Moon Bay. And at first, I have to let you know, I was upset. I was not the only one that was upset about compromising, to move minimum wage to the January 1st. 2021, but now that we talked about it, now we understand, and I think it was a good decision. Even though a few other things have happened, I don't know if you know. Well, I'm sure you do, about public charge and how is that affecting. It's going to affect part of our community here in Half Moon Bay, and still continue to do $12.50 an hour, which is not a we're still gonna say it's a struggle. And just today, one of the things we've been working on is about affordable housing here in the coast. And yesterday, a young man, early 20s, yes, came to me, he saw me this morning and said, Joaquin, our family needs help. We're being evicted from our place, from our home. It's a large family. The grandma just had a stroke not too long ago. She's an elder, and the youngest kid in the family is age of 5. And they, before they came to this house, they were homeless for about 3 weeks because they were evicted from the previous house. And we still having that in our community. Our families are being evicted, and they're under stress. Everybody works in the family, except for the grandma. But he works, his mom works. He has older siblings, go to school. His uncles, they work. His cousins work. And still we're losing our families. So, comment about we need affordable housing. And we need to move quick because we are losing our families. And like I said, giving, compromising with Rocket Farms to the minimum wage, it's something that we understand now, and we want to thank you. And for the fact that you brought up, $15 to the table, and we waiting for, January 1st. But housing, please, consider moving as quick as we can, in housing, affordable housing. I know Midpen is ready to work. I know the organizations in the area are opposing, some of the proposed locations. But, we also have a couple of the locations in Half Moon Bay. We're hoping the city of Half Moon Bay will, we work something out with, with the county of San Mateo and Midpen to provide housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Joaquin. Joaquin, I don't know if you know this, Joaquin just won a big award in the community. Joaquin, you want to tell us about the award real quick? Come on, give it a little shout out.
Well, I was awarded with the Role Model of the Year 2020 by the City of Half Moon Bay Chamber of Commerce. It's something, that I want to take on my own. I think it belongs to the community. And it's just not me who works hard in the community to make this a better place, a good place for our families. So what we do, is not because we want to be recognized. We do it from our heart. And we do take this recognition because I believe I'm the first Latino to receive this recognition. So I will take it for the community.
Can we give him a round of applause? It's very congratulations.
We have Scott McVicker for item 1B, minimum wage ordinance.
Good evening, Council. What I want to stress here is one word, purview, and there are several sub-definitions of that word, but with regards to this minimum wage ordinance, the state went through their processes with all the people they had available and determined a time at which the wage should be increased, the schedule, how much. This 5-member board lacks the competence and experience and expertise to usurp the state's decision. They're going to damage the very people they're going to try and help through job loss and creating an anti-business, anti-competitive environment right here in this town, not just 10 miles up the road. You're going to penalize local businesses if you decide to implement this advance in the schedule for minimum wage. And someone had to say it, so here I am saying it. If you decide to go ahead with this, please speak clearly into the microphone so that everyone can know how you've justified this decision and they can see who is responsible for the result. Thanks.
Thank you for that, for those comments. So now we will go to the approval of the, oh, is there anybody else? I'm sorry. I thought that was it. Yeah, sorry. Proclamations and presentations, which we have none. And let's go to the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as is?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, so the agenda moves forward as is. All in favor? Mayor's announcements of community activities and community service. I have none. Report out from recent closed session meetings.
The council did not meet in closed session this evening.
All right, perfect. And city manager updates to council.
Wow, Mr. Mayor, we're moving right along tonight. But we do have a few presentations, so we'll slow the pace back down. Mr. Mayor and members of council, members of the public, we have 3 short presentations tonight under CM updates. The first 2 are status updates on 2 public works projects, an update on Ocean View Park and what's going on there, and then also an update on work that was done to the access, the vertical access at Poplar Beach, and then finally we'll finish up with a presentation on the upcoming census. So first up, Public Works. Maz, your city engineer.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, public, thank you so much for welcoming me here tonight. Maz Bazuguni, city engineer. Just want to give a quick update on the Ocean View Park project. We have been working on this project for the last, since the beginning of January. We are on track on our schedule. We're looking at the delivery of the new fabricated bathroom structure on this Thursday. And starting next Monday, we're looking at a 2-week closure of the park. We'll try to wrap it up sooner than that, but we have some site work and concrete work around the play areas that we need to be completed. So we're looking at finishing up the irrigation and landscaping after that, and hoping to have it completion by the end of March.
Very exciting. What do you think it's going to look like? You got predictions?
It's going to look great.
Good answer. All right, good. All right, well, thank you.
Next, I wanted to give a brief update on the Poplar Vertical Access Project. So this project, we've hit a little bit of a snag. We went out and advertised the project for proposals on December 12th of last year. We had a 5-week window given the holiday season. Unfortunately, after solicitation and calling a couple of contractors, we did not receive any on the bid opening on the 14th of January. So we're looking at some of the different details of the plan and look to rebid this in the near future. Hopefully, looking at getting a contractor on board by late spring. We'll definitely keep you guys posted as we move forward.
Thank you, Maz.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Victor Gaitan, Management Analyst in the City Manager's Office. I'm happy to be here tonight to give you a brief update on the Census 2020, which is coming up very soon. We'll start with a little bit of background on what the census is. And very simply, it is the official count of every single person living in the United States. It happens every single 10 years. Each household is asked to complete a census form, and the Census Bureau collects basic information about every single member living in a household. That's basically what it is. But here's why it is so important. First off, equal representation. Census data determines the number of U.S. representatives that each state sends to Congress. Assuming that, and it's predicted that we might get an undercount in California, California is at risk of losing a congressional seat this year. Next up is funding for critical programs and services. Census counts determine how $675 billion are allocated to states every single year. Latest estimates show that California is set to receive approximately $115 billion of those 675, assuming we get an accurate count. Those funds go towards critical programs and services that support education, housing, health and transportation services in our communities, services like Medi-Cal, Medicare, SNAP, WIC, Head Start, funding for schools, subsidized housing, and for roads. And lastly, the data collected through the census is used to make very important planning decisions by local governments, businesses, developers, transportation planners, community organizations, and residents. And that's just a little glimpse as to why it's so important. Now, here's some important information that you need to know about the census. As mentioned, it's coming up very soon. In fact, it's 56 days away from today, because official census day is April 1st of this year. But everyone will start receiving census forms in the mail around March 12th. They should be fully received by March 20th. After that, reminder letters will follow in late March and April if you have not filled out the census. And then starting in May, census workers called enumerators will start knocking on doors of anyone who has not filled the census. So if you don't want anyone knocking on your door, highly suggest you fill out the census as soon as possible. Now, for the first time ever, 80% of the census will be conducted online. Usually it's conducted on paper, as it has been up until now. But households that the Census Bureau has predetermined as having unreliable broadband internet access will receive paper copies. And it's difficult to tell exactly who will receive that, but some people in some of the more rural areas in this county should probably receive paper copies. Now, if you would like to fill it out on paper, you can request a copy. There's a number on the form you receive. But while you're on the phone, you can also take the census on the phone. And here's a sample of what the forms will look like. Make sure that any forms you receive about the census have the official census logo. That is a letter you receive on the left-hand side, and then that's a sample of the actual census questionnaire on the right-hand side. Now, what will the census ask? Basic information about each household, including the number of people living there, whether the residence is owned or rented, type of residence, and a telephone number in case follow-up is necessary. And then for every single person living in the household, it will ask their name, sex, age, date of birth, race, and ethnicity. And they really mean every single person. It doesn't matter if you're a family member, if you're just a friend or an extended relative that's living in the household. And surprisingly, one of the most undercounted groups are children 5 and below. For some reason, people just forget to count their kids, I guess. And here's a sample of what the Internet Self-Response Portal will look like. You go here, you enter the access code that's sent to you. If for some reason you're forgetful, you misplace the letter with the access code, you can still access the census form by entering your address and all that information. And if as you'll see at the top of the sample webpage there are 13 languages you can fill out the census online. The paper form, unfortunately, has English and Spanish available, but when you call, there's also those 13 languages available. And the Census Bureau is having a completely separate effort to count people experiencing homelessness. The first effort will be starting on the night of March 30th and going all the way through April 1st. Where census workers will go out and interview and record responses from people experiencing homelessness in emergency and transitional shelters, soup kitchens, mobile food vans, and some predetermined targeted outdoor locations. The second effort between April 9th and May 4th, census workers will go out to what they call transitory locations to collect responses. That includes RV parks, motels, campgrounds, racetracks, circuses, carnivals, and marinas. And here's what we're doing as a city so far. Next Wednesday, actually, I think all of you should have received an invitation to a census outreach training. I've been working very closely with my counterparts over at the County Office of Community Affairs. They're leading the census charge in this county. And they've done some exceptional trainings, one of them that I went to, and so they're actually bringing that training here to the coast side. I've invited a lot of our service providers, the chamber, and a lot of folks in the community and the schools to receive this training, and it's really focusing on messaging and how to answer the difficult questions of, how do I know that my information is secure? Why should I fill out the census? All sorts of stuff like that. So it will be a really great training. Also next week, we're going to announce and publicly open up a census essay contest for middle and high school students. Hopefully that'll motivate students to get thinking about the census, tell their parents about the census. I know when, 10 years ago when I was graduating high school, I filled out the census for my parents. I imagine that might be a case for a lot of, especially older high school students. So it's really great to try to get them motivated and engaged. Then on April 1st, which is the official Census Day, we're going to have a Census kickoff event called Census Night Out, similar to an Elections Night Out event. That will be hosted at the Half Moon Bay Library, and we'll have more information to follow, but really it's about welcoming people in. We'll have laptops available there at the library where people can take the census. A lot of the library staff have been trained on how to help people with any questions they may have, so we're hoping to make it a good event. Also, the city is working on co-hosting some events with other organizations like ALAS. Still not sure exactly what that look like, but I'm actually have a meeting with them tomorrow. And then just general outreach, promotion, support. I've kind of been living and breathing census for the last couple of weeks or months. And I feel like just kind of going through the motions. I know a lot about it. I feel like I'm a source of information, happy to answer questions or happy to redirect any questions I can't answer to the Census Bureau or the County Census Office. And how can you help? First and foremost, spread the word. Whoever you talk to, slip a little message about the census in there. Ask if they know about it, what it is, how they can participate, and how important it is. You can also attend Census Night Out. Bring your friends, family, tell people about it. And lastly, and most importantly, make sure you fill out the census on time. And that is it.
Victor, thank you so much for that presentation. Councilwoman Penrose has a question for you.
Yeah, will there be daycare provided for families at the Census Night Out?
Yes, and I forgot to mention that. Thank you for bringing that up. So I am working with Annie from the library. I think she's working on some sort of children's program to incentivize parents to come to the library in the first place, and they can just come on over. We'll also have food there. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Councilmember Barbach.
Will there be a citizenship question on the census? And if not, can we get that information out to people who might otherwise object to filling out the form?
Thank you. I should have addressed that too, but no, there will not be. As of Supreme Court decision in July of last year, all the forms are printed already. There is no citizenship question. All the information that we'll ask is the basic information that I listed there.
I know. What if someone doesn't want to put their phone number down or their last name or something like that?
So I've received kind of mixed information on that. Some people from the Census Bureau have mentioned that the census must be fully filled out or else you're at risk of someone, an enumerator, showing up at your door to try to fill in the missing information. I've also heard the contrary that, if you omit your race, your ethnicity, your stuff like that, it might be okay. It's a difficult question to answer, one that I don't necessarily have an answer to yet. I can follow up with the Census Bureau and my counterparts at the County Census Office and see if they have a more definite answer to that.
I just wanted to say great job. And this is another opportunity to engage the community and get to know the community and let them get to know us. So I'm really pleased at the level of our effort here. So thank you.
It really is. All right, thank you.
Victor, everybody's so impressed. It's nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, before you move on to the consent calendar, though, and entertain a motion on any part or all of the consent calendar, our city attorney does have a comment that you might think is interesting on item 1B, the minimum wage ordinance that the speaker spoke to under public forum.
Perfect.
Thank you. I did just want to clarify regarding the comment about the city adopting a minimum wage when the state has already done so. State law does expressly allow cities to adopt their own local minimum wage ordinance that can be higher than the state minimum wage. And in fact, my understanding is if this goes forward tonight, Half Moon Bay would be the 50th city in the nation to have a local minimum wage ordinance. And a large portion of those are in the Bay Area, given, I would assume, the cost of living here is proportionally higher than other parts of the state. So I did want to just note that as a legal matter. And then secondly, just as a procedural matter, regarding, who is voting on the ordinance, this is a second reading of the minimum wage ordinance. So ordinances, as you know, and perhaps members of the community may or may not, require 2 readings, 2 city council meetings. So the first reading, which you did at the last meeting, was a roll call vote. And the second reading are typically done on a consent item, such as it's in place here, which is done all with one motion. Of course, you have the discretion to pull an item from the consent calendar, but assuming that it does stay on consent, those are typically done all in one motion without the roll call vote. Thank you.
Those are excellent clarifications, Ms. City Attorney. Thank you so much. Moving on to the consent calendar, do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the consent calendar. Items 1A, waive reading of resolutions and ordinances. Item 1B, ordinance adding Chapter 3.300, minimum wage to the Half Moon Bay Municipal Code, second reading. Item 1C, mayor's list of city council reps and designated assignments for 2020. Quarterly financial report for the second quarter of fiscal year 2019-20. Treasurer's report for the quarter ending December 31, 2019. And that's it.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, the consent calendar passes with a unanimous vote. We're moving on to ordinances and public hearings. Item 2A, amendments to zoning code for the commercial downtown, commercial residential, commercial visitor serving, and commercial general districts and parking standards. We have our planning director, Jill Ekus, here to give us this presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We're very happy to be here tonight to bring this ordinance forward to you. This is the mixed-use district ordinance is focused on those districts that the mayor just listed out, and we'll talk about those a bit, as well as the proposed changes to the city's parking standards applicable to those zones. The presentation is intended to be brief. You have studied quite a few pieces of this recently. I'll share an overview of the ordinance, focusing in on 3 main topics: Heritage Main Street, the residential, commercial, and mixed uses, as well as parking standards. This is a public hearing item, and so you will be taking comment. Of course, there's always time to ask staff for clarifying questions along the way, and we're happy to do that. This is a first reading. And as you know, this was an interrelated suite of amendments. They are coordinated to create opportunities for new uses, potentially new development, and to provide preservation of existing development and character in Half Moon Bay. As I referred to, this has been in the public discourse for a while now, and of course these specific times when there were meetings are noted here, and they started back in July with the Planning Commission having a study session. But we just want to remind everybody in the room that this really came from a lot of input about the land use plan policy work. So there's been a lot of context that went into this zoning amendment, and we've also received quite a bit of public input and been working with individual community members and property owners to bring you this code. This is specifically the follow-up zoning that we told you about in December when council put forward an urgency ordinance. The urgency ordinance had a very narrow focus on maintaining the uses on the ground floor of Main Street for 4 blocks between Correas and Pilarcitos Creek. This ordinance, if it is adopted and eventually certified by the Coastal Commission, will lift the urgency ordinance. It would be gone at that point. This would replace it in whole. And this ordinance has a lot more breadth and depth and flexibility than what the urgency ordinance was about, and that was always the intent. So first of all, just a quick orientation on what are these mixed-use districts and where are they located? The city has 4 mixed-use districts. The commercial visitor serving district is typically, you'll see in this kind of salmon pink color, it's at the very north and very south ends of town. It's things like Sam's Chowder House is in that zone. And the focus of that district is to provide uses that are really supportive of coastal access and recreation, in particular, lodging, restaurants, etc. Then we have 3 districts that are primarily focused in and around downtown. The general commercial zone in that little, I'm sorry, that was pretty blurry, that inset map, general commercial covers the shopping centers. That's New Leaf and Strawflower, and those areas where there tend to be larger lot and have strip commercial types of development are in the general commercial zone. South of 92 is the commercial downtown district. Most of what we're talking about tonight has to do with the commercial downtown district. This is highly relevant to your interest in focusing development in the town center. There's another district that's there's just a little bit of it. It's called commercial residential. It's a transitional zone between the commercial downtown and the neighborhood behind it. We are not very focused on that one because it's pretty built out and it's really a transition zone. So for the most part, the changes that we're going to talk about are commercial downtown, but they also do reflect on other zones. So back when we saw the Planning Commission in December, they were very supportive of the follow-up zoning code as a whole. They were interested in a range of things that could help support more vibrant, active ground floor uses on Main Street and make housing easier to bring forward and deal with the parking code. And they were pleased with that mix of things. And we'll talk more about parking and residential uses in a minute. But with regards to Heritage Main Street, which were those 4 blocks that we talked about, they were very supportive. They liked the protections, but they also heard that there was a desire for some more flexibility. And so staff did quite a bit of research over the next month, and when we brought the code back to the commission, it included all of these things that you're seeing tonight that add flexibility, frontage depth, old houses, etc. And we'll just click through them quickly. So there are 4 really handsome old houses on Main Street. 2 of them are down by Feed and Fuel, and the other 2 are just past Cafe Society, and 3 of the 4 are actually on your register. They're all around 1920 or earlier for year built, and we're encouraging that they just be exempted from this requirement. They were never designed to be retail spaces or restaurants per se. Sometimes houses convert really nicely into those other kinds of uses, and sometimes they don't. They have a setback. They don't have storefront windows. All of the other buildings on Heritage Main Street, with the exception of Bank of America, were built with storefronts right on the sidewalk. Everything else except for these 4 houses. So we think that this will really help maintain the houses. It's hard to have parking work for them, etc. So I'll keep on moving. Commission was very comfortable with that. Frontage depth is a concept where we were asked by real estate community members if the requirement for an active ground floor use could be just focused on the front of the building near the sidewalk, and if it would be okay to put something else behind it. And that's okay in a lot of other cities. We have worked on codes like that. I've worked on codes like that. City of San Mateo requires at least 60 feet. Redwood City, I think, used to have 50, and they've dropped it to 20. I did a lot of research on this. This is similar to liner buildings that you might see in a more urban setting where uses are wrapped around a parking structure. It's really hard to make anything less than 20 work well, although there are some folks who support that. So your staff's proposing 50 feet and allowances to reduce to 20 with a use permit. How would this work? One example you see here is this is actually the Zabala House property, and the area that goes back in blue is about 50 feet, and that fronts not only Main Street, but it also fronts that courtyard. From my perspective, that would really kind of need 50 feet there to serve the function of activating both of those spaces. The greenish yellow color is about 20 feet. You can see that it's not really going to engage the courtyard, although it could support a use that really faces the sidewalk. In particular, frontage depth requirements can really come into play on corners as well as larger buildings and courtyards like we were just looking at. So the picture on the bottom here is actually a really good example of how this might look in real life. Goldworks is probably 30 feet or less in depth, and it was approved, set up in that manner to, it hides the parking behind. Some people might want it to be wrapped farther around the corner. I'm one of them, but it's working really well for their use, and it looks like a good, nice part of downtown. Cunha's is shown here because people wanted to know, well, what would happen if, could you have an office in the back and a different kind of retailer in the front someday if it was a new use? And you could. The trees show, I think it was the second tree back is about 50 feet back. Don't look at the shadow, look at the actual tree. And behind that, you could imagine there being a separate entrance and maybe some kind of a storefront to an office. So that's the intention for frontage depth. Other flexibilities, this one was a request to allow some office uses on the ground floor of these blocks under certain circumstances. And so staff, we struggle with temporary uses. We were asked, well, couldn't it just be temporary? Someone else wanted it to meet the kind of a walk-in clientele standard. This is something that the city of San Carlos uses, and I did talk to their planners about how that works for them. And we were also asked about, well, wouldn't it be better than to let a vacancy sit for a while? So what we proposed to the Planning Commission is if they wanted to do this, that they'd put all those different requirements together, which is more protective to the city, and it would be done with a use permit. It would be allowed for only 1 year. A 1-year extension could be granted if it was really behaving as it is supposed to be. And the kinds of uses that you might see are listed there. Those are pretty standard uses in a number of zoning codes for some A streets and sometimes B streets for ground floor uses. Although we do know travel agencies aren't really tending to come in downtowns anymore. They really don't need that kind of space. Health services is a use that could actually meet the requirement of being active ground floor. So for example, an optometrist that has a really nice frame shop in the front would actually not need to have this requirement. It would be okay as is. We were asked about some other kinds of uses like a herbologist, and if they're selling products in the front and practicing in the back, that's fine. That all complies with the intent for the code and would not need to be one of these walking clientele temporary uses. They would just be able to get established. And then more flexibility. We were thinking about custom industry, just getting inspired, frankly, by the new library and the makerspace. right now, the current code for downtown allows custom industry on a very limited basis. The way that it's described is it's quite specific and very artisan-y, jewelry making, candle making. Those are great things, but there's a lot of other ways to make things now, and it doesn't all have to be with hand tools. That's also emphasized. The library has a 3D printer. A lot of people have 3D printers. There's all kinds of other studio and makerspace options. So as the Planning Commission thought about that, they said, yeah, we're comfortable with that as long as it's really open and people can come in and out. So there's a wide range of uses that could come under that. In focusing on that, came to my attention from Councilwoman Reddick that we had missed repair. So you're going to see at the end of this presentation, I think you have a handout. Did everybody get that handout? Perfect. Okay, you're going to see that we prepared a couple revisions, and this is one where we want to make sure that we still would allow things, repair and maintenance types of uses like shoe repair or appliance repair, things like that. Not auto repair. All right, so that's it for Heritage Main Street. So this is, those are a range of things that are not currently allowed in the urgency ordinance that we really brought back in terms of providing that flexibility along the vein of what we were intending to do with supporting Main Street, its pedestrian orientation, that park once and walk, and the environment that we see really advertised about Half Moon Bay as having the charming downtown that we're working on. Moving on to uses. The key bit here is the city has these 4 mixed-use districts, and in all 4 of them, you have to get a use permit right now. Someone would need to get a use permit to establish residential use, even residential use in a building that has been designed for residential purposes, as we say, to use a house as a house, and that actually happened here. We also require a use permit, which is it's a conditional discretionary permit that really focuses on evaluating the compatibility of uses in a zone. We require a use permit for mixed-use development in the mixed-use districts. Now, that might need to be done if, for example, there's a commercial use that might have impacts and not be compatible with residential. It needs to be conditioned in that manner. So that commercial use should trigger the use permit requirement, not just the fact that there's 2 uses together. Most of the uses that we have already in mixed-use format in downtown get along very well, as we say. So we just don't need to be doing use permits for all of these things. So we're encouraging that we make these things permitted uses and not require that CUP is a conditional use permit. Don't require conditional use permits for residential or mixed use in the commercial downtown, residential, or general district. Now, I'm proposing to not change much about this in the commercial visitor serving zone because that zone is really sensitive from the Coastal Commission's perspective, and it frankly doesn't have much capacity for housing in it or for mixed-use development. So you're really not missing out on what you're looking for. Plus, it's at the 2 ends of town, and we think you're focused on the town center. So this is how we came forward with it.
Jill, where is this commercial visitor serving?
So that was, for example, at the north and south end of town. North end of town, that Sam's Chowder House area, hotels. The south end of town, Cameron's Pub, for example. So it's not in your downtown. Does that help? Okay. All right, so then this is really important for us. getting, if we can set aside that use permit requirement, it still might not take away all of the requirements for discretionary review, because the definition of development is it includes the change of intensity of use. So, for example, a conversion of office space to residential could require a coastal development permit. However, if no use permit is required with it, it gives the applicant, developer, or landowner a lot more flexibility. Small conversions of existing space could possibly qualify for a director hearing or even an administrative review at the director level instead of going to the planning commission. There'd be a lower deposit fee. It's fewer discretionary actions, less to appeal. It would be consistent with the Coastal Act and LCP, and it would go faster. It's really a facilitator for small things. And for larger things that need to go to the Planning Commission for public hearing, it doesn't stand in the way of that. It wouldn't preclude that, that proper part of the process would still happen. I've had a lot of feedback from property owners about this for conversion of upstairs spaces, and they're really happy about it. Okay. There we go. There's many other considerations that you would have seen if you looked at the strike-through underlying code. And by the way, the yellow highlights in the code are things that changed since the Planning Commission saw it based on some of their input, and then additional research that we had been doing. Everything else that is shown in that edit format is what the Planning Commission reviewed. We tried to be completely overt about every layer of where changes happened along the way. I'm not going to get into these things. The first two here, they're items that have frustrated your staff in reviewing applications. So there's some cleanup that went in here, and these things help. I do want to highlight research and development. Research and development is a really interesting use for Half Moon Bay. We don't have a lot of light industrial lands. We don't have places where a significant amount of office park like that would ever happen. But on a small scale, the city's been successful having some really nice startups that, you know, at some point they're really successful. They may need to move, but this is a really good place to get started for them. And the zones where research and development is allowed is fairly narrow. What we recognized, and I think you read correspondence about this from someone who's interested in a use like this, is that it's not allowed in the commercial downtown, but the city allows laboratories as a permitted use in the same district. And they can be substantially similar. The need for research and development now to have a lot of space or hazardous materials and things like that it's super dependent on exactly what the use is, and there's so many kinds of research and development. So I'm really comfortable bringing this forward as allowing it in the CD with it scaled to the laboratory allowance that is already in the code, and also to treat it like the custom industry that the Planning Commission had discussed. The Planning Commission has talked about uses like this in the past. They're very supportive. They would like us to be able to have small and incubator and even medium-sized businesses of this sort. And we have, you got code for this and a little bit of writing about it in your staff report. The city attorney gave another review on that and has improved the language, and that's the other part of what's in front of you on that piece of paper tonight. And let's see, we are at, there were a few more code things that we wanted to do to clean things up and make it easier to deal with transitions between uses and have storage for new residential units, since we are proposing to reduce parking. We'll talk about that in a sec. And continued on the theme tonight is parking. The proposal is mostly focused on the commercial downtown. The intent overall is to provide a lot more flexibility and acknowledge how shared uses can work together in this format. Most cities have some kind of shared use parking reduction. We've defined two kinds of parking reductions that could be allowed in the commercial downtown with very specifically defined findings, so the developer has some sense of certainty about whether or not they would qualify, as opposed to the way the code is written now for parking exceptions. It's really unanchored. It's hard to know if the exception is within reason, and so this should really clear things up quite a lot. Still maintaining an opportunity for parking exceptions. We don't want to put everything into a corner. But then also a very big deal is configuration. The city's code right now is really specific about garage spaces, and we recommend having a lot more flexibility about how parking is arranged on mixed-use property. This is the sum up of how it would work. This is comparing the current code with the proposed code in the middle, and then with these additional reductions for three types of uses. The first row is for single use, just residential only, 8 two-bedroom units. And you can see the difference between the current code of 2 spaces per unit plus guest parking. The proposed code is a space and a half per unit of that size, plus guest parking with allowances to have the guest parking waived under meeting certain findings as mentioned before. The next row is single use, commercial, 3,000 square feet of retail space, for example. And the current code would require 12 spaces, that's 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet. As proposed, the new code would be down to 3. This is more typical of most codes, and so we would recommend this change. On its own, it wouldn't really be set up for any more waivers. But the mixed use, the bottom row, where those two uses are added together, should they be granted the exception to knock off the 2 guest parking spaces, they are also subject to a potential 20% reduction of the whole for being mixed use with shared parking facilities. See, if all these parking places are in garages for the residential units, they're not available to share. But if they're available for sharing, and if the uses are a good fit in terms of when they peak, they have offset peaking, this kind of code works really well. Staff looked at least 20 codes, and we have a lot of experience with this kind of parking and have been very sensitive to the fact that most cities that have parking like this in this area have lots of transit, and their codes are more aggressive. So we went beyond that and really tried to find something that was scaled right to Half Moon Bay and consistent with what the Planning Commission has been approving for parking exceptions. And a few more things were in the parking code. We wanted to be very clear about guest parking requirements for duplexes and triplexes, especially now that parking in that kind of use can be used for conversion to accessory dwelling units, depending on how it's configured. So we've really hit that a little bit differently. The parking exceptions are simplified, and we've acknowledged lower emission vehicle parking. That is quite a bit of detail, and as you know me, I could always do more, so I will stop here. This is your motion, and these are the proposed recommended changes, but you have them written out in front of you as well, and they were provided as well at the table over there to make sure people see them. And then should you make your first reading tonight, these are the tentative next steps. Second reading would follow, and then we would be compiling this into an application for Coastal Commission certification. We will seek this to be a minor amendment to expedite review through the Coastal Commission. We've been reviewing this with our staff and have positive feedback about it up to this point, so we're hopeful that they'll be pleased. And as I already mentioned, that interim urgency ordinance would be lifted at that point in time. And happy to take questions and let you have your public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. A lot of information to digest. Do we have any clarifying questions before we open it up for public comment? No, as I hear none, we'll open it up to the public.
Scott Wenberger, followed by Chad Hooker.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. I represent Gen X Technologies Incorporated, but before I get to that, I want to thank you for all listening to me today. I'm a 25-year resident of the Coast Side, been here since 1995. I moved here because we started a company that we basically sold to the Hewlett-Packard Company and allowed me to bring my wife Carla back to the San Francisco Bay Area, and we settled here in the wonderful community ever since that time. Gen X Technologies is an early-stage life science company that is basically creating solutions and new products for biopharmaceutical research. We turned the lights on in September of 2017, and since that time, we basically secured about $4.8 million worth of funding from the National Institutes of General Medical Sciences. I think that you also have a copy, that Jill has sent you a copy of this particular document that you can review. Also included in that was a congratulatory letter from the Honorable Jackie Spear on the most recent grant award that we received from NIGMS. It's my intent to basically build out Gen X Technologies as a viable and very valuable member of the Half Moon Bay City. The last company that I basically built out out of my garage was venture financed, and we ended up having to move that out of California because of the constraints that the venture monies placed upon us at that time. What I'd like to do with Gen X is something quite different. I'd like to create 21st century, high-paying, high-quality jobs for the local community. Many people, just like myself, find ourselves having to go over the hill and work in the Silicon Valley, in Palo Alto, in Redwood City, in San Carlos, and do that commute. In fact, the last company that I started, I had to move all the way down to Los Gatos. In this case, we have a really talented pool of people that we can tap here from as far north as Pacifica and as far south as Half Moon Bay. We are now basically 5 full-time employees. I'm recruiting 3 more employees as well, and all of those candidates are basically coming from the Half Moon Bay, El Granada, Pacifica locales. So I want to thank you again for your attention, and I'm available to answer any questions if you should have them.
Thank you. Any questions?
No, it appears, I looked up the locations on the map that you
Yes.
included in your letter, so it looks like he's free and clear for the locations that
Correct,
you want.
and the
Yeah.
physical plant actually fits extremely well with the statute you're considering right now.
Yes, yeah, so I just wanted to point that out.
All right, thank you.
It's a good clarification. No, thank you. Anybody else? Good. We're excited for your business. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Chad Hooker, followed by Ed Love.
Evening, council members. I've looked over the revisions that Jill has described in some detail, and by and large, not by and large, in their entirety, I approve of this a great deal, and I urge you to pass these things. But what I'd like to speak to you specifically about is the parking ordinance. I've been a general contractor here on the coast since 1977. A great many of the commercial projects that I did have been right here in town, and many of those I was involved in the design and subsequent permitting process. My experience has been that the existing parking code has been insurmountable several times, and has, you compare the economic viability of a project when you try to figure out if you can afford to build it, and then you look at the parking code and guess which one trumps. So the parking code takes precedence over the money, you don't build it. And it's been an unfortunate thing that it's taken so many years to get this code straightened up. So, and a good example of that is the corner of Main and Kelly. That project's been sitting there, with a fence around that property for 13 years. It was the parking code that drove that thing into the ground. All other aspects of it were code compliant, and it probably would have passed the Coastal Commission. So this revision addresses those things, and I want you to know that I've taken these code updates that Jill showed so effectively in that table, 1.5 parking spaces instead of 2 for the mixed-use residential, shared parking spots, 250 goes to 300 square feet for commercial, et cetera. I've taken a few of these things and kind of test-driven them through some proposed projects that are in front of the city now, and also projects I'm familiar with from having built them, things that are already existing. And this is a significant change. It really does work well. So that brings us kind of around to the question of, well, if we're going to change the codes and allow a great deal more development without as much parking, is that going to work? And I'd call your attention to a survey that I believe the staff did last summer. I believe largely focused on the historic district downtown, but it indicated that there really isn't a parking shortage. I live 2 blocks from City Hall, and I couldn't agree more. When I go in town, there's parking all over the place all the time. Remember, in a one-horse town like this, people want to park in front of the door they want to go into. In San Francisco, if you can park within 9 blocks of where you want to be, you're happy. Burlingame, 5 blocks. Here, that's your favorite parking space. Somebody else is in it. There's a crisis. So, the council can overcome this by passing this code, and I strongly urge you to do that. To move to another subject somewhat, I would also urge council to task staff somehow with finding property for public parking. This ordinance upgrade works now, but where are we in 10 years? In 10 years, the last few viable spots in town will be owned by somebody else, buildings will be on them. Figure out where you can buy, or probably more effectively, lease property. I would strongly suggest you look at the property that's between the Catholic Church and the creek. It's close enough to downtown, put a parking lot there, lease it from the Catholics for 1,000 years, ready to go. Thanks for your attention.
Hey, very, very good information, Chad. Any questions for Chad? Okay. Sorry, we're going to go back and we're going to ask a question to the gentleman who spoke right before. Yeah. This is Vice Mayor Brownstone.
So I really appreciate that you're building some new business in town. I had a couple of questions, just also for public knowledge. What are some of, or at least what you can talk about that's not proprietary, what sort of biopharma products are you?
So we make laboratory instrumentation that biopharmaceutical researchers use to determine what the structure of the biomolecules that they are making. Mm-hmm. So basically, we take a footprint of a drug, and that footprint is essential for understanding whether or not that drug is going to be effective, or whether or not it's going to have side effects, or whether or not it's going to have really bad side effects. And so this is a new technology that we brought out during the course of this year. Our first product we sold was to the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta. And we're also basically selling products up in the South San Francisco area. So it's mostly used by laboratories that make biopharmaceuticals.
So, yeah, maybe you could just educate me a little further. So you are making testing and assessment equipment for...
We make laboratory instrumentation.
Right.
So you walk into a laboratory, you see the benches, what the equipment is. That's what we make. We make stuff on those benches.
So some more stupid questions maybe. So let's say you're making stuff for Center for Disease Control, and you want to test if the equipment's calibrated well, working well, and et cetera, or identifying what it's supposed to. Do you actually get samples of various strains of bacteria or whatever?
No, not at all. So the stuff that we get, you could eat. Okay. It's basically proteins. They're not toxic. We get materials that are easily transported through the mail or through UPS or FedEx. They're easily handled without any special requirements. In fact, the total amount of toxicity that we generate as an entity is less than a barbershop or a beautician shop that we have on Half Moon Bay right now.
And that would be the case looking forward?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because I think public would be, want to make sure that
Yeah,
safe
no,
products are being
absolutely.
handled and others.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
In fact, I encountered this once before. I had to basically get a clearance from the county in the unincorporated township of Montero, which was the same issue. And quite frankly, as I said moments ago, we generate far less toxic material than a beautician does.
Great. Yeah, I know there's a heightened sensitivity these days, so I just thought we'd
Yep,
clarify that, so I appreciate that.
I understand, I appreciate it.
Great, all right, thanks.
Thank you.
Ed Love?
Good evening, Mayor Eisen and the City Council. And it is a good evening because you have in front of you these very, very timely amendments and revisions to the zoning ordinance that are going to be replacing and helping us with projects and getting rid of the antiquated zoning ordinances that go way, way back and don't have much value for us today. Chad pretty much covered the parking portion of it, and we're interested also in the mixed-use portion of it because they all go together very well. And there have been projects in the past that have not penciled out, and they were good projects, but they just weren't feasible because of the antiquated zoning ordinances. So now we're working on a project, and basically what Jill showed before, the matrix with the various, showed what happens when the code gets changed is very much based on what's going to happen at Main and Kelly. So that big, tall, white 8-foot fence, stuff's going on there, and you'll hear more about it. So stay tuned. Thank you. Any questions?
No, let me just say I'm very excited for that project to
we all
take
are.
place. So it's going to be great for the city as a whole.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any other public comments on that one? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. Open it up to council for discussion. Mr. Rarback looks like he's ready to take it over.
This is just a general comment about parking. I think any long-term vision is going to show that there's going to be fewer and fewer needs for parking between automated vehicles, ride sharing, if we finally get more trails and bike paths. So I'm not commenting about any particular part of these zoning changes, just be aware that I believe in 10 years from now, there will be a lot less need for parking than we currently have.
Councilwoman Reddick.
Reddick, that's me. I believe when we had our discussion, our joint meeting with the Planning Commission, giving some direction on policy for the LCP update, one of the things I mentioned is we wanted to make sure that we had an adequate amount of land zoned for public facilities so that we had some flexibility for a parking garage or perhaps, a solar energy function, but to make sure that we had enough light industrial and public facilities so that we could cover those sorts of uses and close to downtown, if not, in downtown. So that we're covered at that time that we may need, more parking or whatever. But I just wanted to say that, so the vision here is that we want to concentrate development in the downtown core and not have so much traffic along Highway 1, phase or minimize development in the outlying areas, concentrated downtown. And to really do that, we have to ease up on restrictions in the downtown core. We want to make it, business friendly. We want to streamline the permitting. So we have that vision, then the policy has to follow that and, make it easier to build down here. And I think Jill and planning staff and the planning commission are doing a good job steering us in that direction. So I agree with Chad. I think the document that we have now is way better, and it's going to serve us well over time. So I'm going to support it tonight.
Councilwoman Penrose?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I agree with everything that has been said so far. I'm excited about it. It's been a long time coming and a lot of hard work on the part of staff and a lot of good input from the business community, which is, really valuable and essential if we're going to be doing anything with policy. If we have got to listen to what our business community needs and work with them to make it work for the residential area and the business area. So I'm excited.
Vice Mayor Brownstone?
Appreciate all the work staff has done on this. It's great. I still, just generally, in terms of responding to what Councilmember Rarback mentioned about, he feels, the vision down the road is less cars. And I appreciate the positive vision. I still do wonder on a really nice summer, touristy summer day when things get crazy gridlocked from all the visitors, because people are bringing their cars who are coming into town from outside. And I am still not sure how we, resolve some of those issues without some public parking lots at the end of town where, people would have to walk 5 or 6 blocks. It's not a big deal. But parking structures at some point to alleviate some of that, because I don't think our popularity is going to diminish. It's a nice place to come on a weekend or a nice summer day. So I think that'll still be an ongoing issue of concern, because sometimes it gets so gridlocked, things just, as we all know, don't even move. So be interested in how we approach that in the future. Thanks.
Well, I think this is great work by staff. I think these zoning amendments bring us into the 21st century, and I think the town will appreciate the projects that are done from this, one of which I think will happen on Main Street in Kelly in the near future. And it's going to make a big difference in our town. So thank you, Jill, for all your work. Again, I think the combination of working with the businesses in town to come up with a lot of the changes has been absolutely what we need to do. And I just appreciate that staff and council takes the time to go out, reach out, and get that input before we make any changes to anything. You want to say something else real quick? Oh, okay. Anybody else want to comment on this before we go to make a motion? All right, can we entertain a motion?
I'd like to move that we introduce an ordinance amending municipal code titled 18 zoning to chapter 18.02 definitions, chapter 18.06 residential land use, chapter 18.07 commercial land use, parentheses CDCR, end parentheses, Chapter 18.08, Commercial Land Use, parentheses C, capital C, VS, and C-G, end parentheses, and Chapter 18.36, Parking Standards, parentheses, Mixed-Use Districts and Parking Standards Ordinance, end parentheses, with recommended amendments as shown. Do I? No. I don't have to read any of this, right? I would also like to recommend that we waive the first reading.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I'd suggest a roll call vote first.
Would you? Okay. All right, let's go for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Penrose?
Aye.
Councilmember Rarback?
Yes.
Councilmember Ruddick?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brownstone?
Yes.
Mayor Eisen?
Yes.
5-0.
All right, ordinance passes 5-0. Well done, Jill. Give her a round of applause. Yeah.
One quick note. So you're going to see us come back with the town center plan, and we can talk all the more we need to about parking and other details over time. Thanks. Thank you so much.
All right, well done, Jill. We're moving on to resolutions and staff reports. We're going to start off with item 3A, the Poplar Beach Gateways Plan Study Session and Professional Services Agreements for Environmental Review and Studies. 3A.
How about now? Okay. Good evening, Mayor Eisen and council members. I'm happy to be here with our city engineer to present an overview of the Poplar Beach Gateways Plan. So in addition to receiving an update, staff is requesting authorization of 2 professional service contracts to initiate the environmental review process. The Poplar Beach Gateways Plan covers the city-owned lands between Poplar Street and Kelly Avenue, as shown here in red. And this plan evolved from the city's 2016 sea level rise vulnerability assessment, which identified this span of coastline as highly vulnerable to erosion, as well as from a follow-up study conducted by Nichols Consulting Engineers, NCE for short, which confirmed that the creation of informal trails along the bluff edge are also contributing to erosion. So the plan addresses the long-term maintenance needs of this city-owned portion of the coastal trail in the context of bluff erosion and sea level rise. To provide a sense of site constraints, the project area is shown again here in red with potential wetland and drainage areas in blue. Including immediately east of the parking lot. I will point out there is a large potential wetland area where you might think would be best to retreat the parking lot. East of the entire project area primarily consists of private lots. West is the beach and bluff area under Coastal Commission permitting jurisdiction. Immediately south of the project area and the parking lot at the bottom of the screen there is county-owned land, which includes the closed landfill. And this yellow line here shows the approximate projected 2050 bluff edge, which is anticipated to reach or exceed the current coastal trail alignment. So the remaining area that you see here is what this plan is trying to deal with.
The county landfill area, does that run from the ocean all the way back? It's shown that way in purple, and I just...
Yes, no, this was an approximation. I don't believe I have a slide that shows the actual landfill extent.
That's county land, but it's not all landfill.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Uh-oh. There we go. Okay, so skip me forward, sorry. Come on. Sorry, it's frozen. Okay, well yeah, sorry, it's a bit delayed here. Here we go. So the primary plan goals align with the issues identified in the sea level rise assessment and the follow-up erosion study, as well as with the goals of the park's master plan and with community input that was gathered through numerous outreach events. The contents of the plan are summarized here on this plan diagram. Overall, the plan limits public access along the bluff edge to allow erosion control, drainage improvements, and habitat restoration, while maintaining visual access and recreation opportunities along the bluff. The plan adds amenities such as permanent restrooms and improves access to the park for all user groups with a drop-off loop and improved parking circulation. The environmental assets to the east of the trail are protected in the plan. The plan has 7 main elements that I will click through quickly here. First, the plan proposes green infrastructure methods for drainage and erosion control. The plan also includes hard infrastructure options if necessary as a last resort. These are included as plan variants as they present permitting challenges. The managed access component of the plan includes retreating the trail inland to allow bluff stabilization and space to adapt to sea level rise. And the trail alignment is conceptual at this level in the plan, and final trail design will need to balance between avoiding wetlands to the east and bluff erosion to the west, as well as preserving the visual and physical experience of walking along the bluff edge. The trail itself is proposed as a split path separated by vegetated buffers to capture stormwater runoff. The trail will need to be adaptable to future bluff retreat, so staff is recommending decomposed granite as a more sustainable, retreatable, and aesthetic material as compared to asphalt. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee and Parks and Rec Commission, both deliberated on the issue of trail material. The BPAC did not reach a consensus, but the Parks and Recreation Commission did approve the plan as you're seeing in front of you today with consensus that asphalt can be assessed as a project alternative in the EIR. Habitat restoration will be implemented as a method of bluff stabilization and green infrastructure and will provide educational opportunities along the trail with interpretive signage. The long-term beach access improvements will be provided as enhancements or replacements to the near-term improvements that are currently underway, as Moz spoke to earlier this evening. Bluff overlooks are included in the plan to provide managed access to the bluffs, as the trail will be retreated inland from the bluff edge. So these overlooks are intended to have a very light footprint with no hardscaping to facilitate future retreat as needed, and will also provide opportunities for light touch amenities such as picnic benches, memorial options, signage, and waste receptacles. These amenities will also be very light touch, intended to improve user experience and be easily moved inland as needed. Parking lot improvement options are, as I mentioned, limited by county ownership to the south and wetlands to the east. So the plan includes a variant for expanding to the north side of Poplar Street with a drop-off loop and equestrian parking area. These improvements are intended to reduce parking impacts in the adjacent neighborhood and to honor the city's commitment to provide permanent equestrian access when the land was purchased from the county. Finally, the plan includes a suite of signage and additional park amenities in the plan area to better serve residents and visitors alike. The Parks and Recreation Commission recommended that staff included sand volleyball facilities on the south side of the parking lot in the early stages of developing this plan. However, as this plan has evolved, staff is now recommending that we do not include this amenity at this location as it is outside of the defined project area. And staff does recognize the community's desire for this type of recreation facility and is working with state parks on other site options. The project elements are grouped into phases by level of CEQA review and level of investment and maintenance. Phase 0 projects do not require CEQA review and can move ahead in advance of plan adoption, such as the gateway signage. Phases 1, 2, and 3 will be covered under a CEQA document to produce a list of shovel-ready projects for grant applications. Staff has determined that a focused environmental impact report is required for this plan. In light of the built-in adaptation and restoration strategies, we will need a formal biological study and wetland delineation for the EIR as well as for construction. Staff recommends continuing this work with NCE and Huffman Broadway Group as they have extensive background on the site conditions and the plan goals and will be able to capture efficiencies with their existing knowledge. So should these two contracts be approved tonight, the next steps for this plan include a notice to proceed with the EIR, a notice of preparation and scoping hearing with the Planning Commission in spring, EIR certification and CDP issuance with the Planning Commission in the fall, and final City Council approval in the winter. To briefly highlight several related projects, the Poplar Street Traffic Calming and Safety Project is moving along and will be coordinating with the Gateways Plan as they both move forward. The City Manager's Office, Public Works Department, and Sheriff's Office are working on plans for a summer management program for the Poplar Beach area. And as mentioned earlier, the Public Works Department is working to find a contractor for the vertical access improvements at Poplar Beach. Your staff recommendations are here as are written in the staff report, and we are available for questions.
Councilmember Arbach?
I'm a little confused about the timing. Yeah, can you go back? Yeah. The EIR and the scoping, that's for this whole almost $10 million project? Is that right, or am I wrong? Okay, so you want to conceptualize this plan, but I assume that the funding doesn't exist at this moment. Am I right about that?
Correct, not for the construction of the plan.
And do you think you'll be able to get money for the construction? I see John Dowdy is walking here, so I think he wants to say something.
I would call that more of a sachet.
Yeah.
Why don't I just, so from a broader perspective, what we have been doing over the past 5 years really has been catching up and doing projects, and you have been funding that with general fund. What we have been doing over the last 1.5 to 2 years is responding and reacting to the world and environment of grant funding and grants available, and a lot of bond funds from the state and other places. What we have not had and made available for that grant environment are shovel-ready projects. So what we are looking at today, Carter Park is an example, you got a presentation on that recently, of where we're moving forward with the plan design of that with no funding in sight for that project. This is a similar situation in which we're looking to ensure that what we can do is look at grant funds and fund pieces and parts of this project. Part of that is ensuring that CEQA process has been completed, that we can look at and deal with it. And sometimes that means, yes, we have to go to more engineering design in order to absolutely be able to move that project forward. But a big piece of that is having the CDP kind of piece in a broad sense done, and the CEQA piece, the Environmental Quality Act piece is done. So yes, this is a $7 million price tag. This is a 25-year plan in our mind and estimation. So probably in terms of all of those amenities, hopefully less than that, but it could be 20 to 25 years before all of that. And yes, things change, but it is a plan and we're moving that forward. But this will give us a shovel-ready basis to look for funds, to apply for grants, and to move forward from that perspective, as well as to start to plan our own CIP and do bits and pieces. That helps.
And just to clarify, and we'll go back to this question and I'll get right to you, but just, we need, what would just, so we can make sure the public understands in terms of, you can't get funding or apply for grants usually before you get to what stage of development on a project?
Well, I'll start with saying this, the basic. There are very few grant agencies and granting funds to do planning work, to do this design work and this level of design. funding agencies want to cut ribbons and open up and build things, like all of us want to and like you want to and for the community. So this is a step where I think the city and all cities really have to take that step, is to do the planning and do that initial design and engineering work to get to the point where you can define and refine your projects more clearly from an engineering perspective. This means that in some cases we may, you as a council with the CIP, choose to proceed forward with actual more detailed design for a specific piece of this plan, because one, you're either looking to potentially fund it with our own funds, park funds, general fund, whatever, and or we think that and understand that there may be a funding source that would look favorably upon this, and therefore the further along we are in the process, the more favorable we're looked at from all granting agencies. It's the rule of the jungle.
Mr. Mayor, and just to add to that, one reason granting agencies typically require CEQA to be completed is that so often that's where a project can get bogged down. So there's a history of government agencies going out and getting grant funds. Maybe when they have 20% design, they have a plan, but they haven't done CEQA. The project gets bogged down in CEQA, then they can't deliver the project. And obviously, the granting agencies want a successful track record of doling out funds for projects that'll get done. So usually that's an important step, as John said. Shovel ready a lot of times means having your CEQA done. And to get CEQA done, you probably have 30% design plans.
A prime example of that is Highway 1 North and South. The county had granted $3.2 million or $3.5 million on each of those, but basically $3.2 million for each of those projects for construction. But they will not sign on the dotted line and fund it and do a funding agreement until we have CEQA done. And so that was an extremely important process on both of those that we worked through to get to the CEQA processes. And they're like virtually every other granting agency. They don't want to be tripped up by CEQA, as Bob said.
Makes perfect sense. Councilwoman Ruddick?
Yeah, so as a project manager for these sorts of projects, I can tell you that staff has crossed all their T's and dotted all their I's. This project is perfectly positioned for state bond funding. You know, we're going to have it shovel ready. We'll have CEQA done. It's the perfect project right now because the concept right now that's very fundable is a multi-benefit project that provides or enhances public recreation and access, you know, treats stormwater runoff, addresses coastal erosion. You know, it really, you know, touches, you know, on all those subjects. And the legislature right now is looking at a minimum of a $5 billion climate resilience bond that will have a lot of money for just this sort of thing, right? I mean, it's just, I really think we're in a great place with this and very fundable. So I'm excited by this. And by doing the more robust environmental document too, we may be able to do more depending on funding availability. You know, it might be that people look at this and go, wow, this is a nice project. And we might want to fund phase 1 and phase 2 now, depending on, you know, the funders' proclivities. So, but you have to have that environmental work done, right? You don't want to just do a piece of it now. You want the big picture. So I just want to congratulate staff on a job well done. I think this is excellent.
Vice Mayor Brownstone?
I think this is an incredibly proactive plan. And we're probably cutting edge in terms of making sure that we are positioned for state bond funding for coastal preservation and enjoyment. In the last 5 years, we here have seen the somewhat terrible, unexpected impacts of supposedly the once in 25-year storms. We've had like 2 in 5 years. And basically, you know, we know about Murata Road, Ritz-Carlton, seeing a new coastal trail bridge being undermined. So And it's pretty hard to predict 2050 protected bluff edge erosion. You know, what current models we have, who the heck knows? So I think when you have a state legislature trying to see, well, what can we anticipate? And having a community and a plan like this that says, yeah, this is what some of the worst case stuff could look like. And it gives you time to also, if you need to, you know, reassess and react in case the speed of erosion is increasing. It's a good kind of plan that you can make adjustments if necessary. So I just congratulate you on looking at the whole scope of this, looking out 30 years, and I think it will be very attractive for bond funding. So thank you.
Councilwoman Penrose?
Yeah, I also wanted to say that it's going to be a great contributor to our climate action plan. It's going to be a big part of it, and that's something that we are working on now. So everything that we're doing seems to be working together, and all for the benefit of visitor serving, maintaining our coastal bluffs, and providing recreation for our citizens. I'm very excited about it. Thank you.
Excellent. I'm also in support. I think it's great. I'm a little disappointed about the sand volleyball, I'm not going to lie. But I understand what needs to be done, but I would like to see us work on more recreation possibilities in the area. Sand volleyball being one of them. It's surprising to me to be a coastal town and not have sand volleyball. We're one of the few places that claims the beach and doesn't use it to that capacity. Moving the trail back scares me, just to be honest. I see people right now that don't even use the trail, and it's 5 feet, and they're off on the dirt part. And I myself have used that dirt closer to the ocean. So it makes me nervous when we do move it back, which I realize we're going to have to do, that we make sure to get a full education campaign out there to the public and let people know why we're doing it and what it would mean to cross that trail. Because as I understand, we're going to be trying to build some flora and fauna in that area to be able to help us with it. And if that gets stepped on, we're going to be moving backwards quickly. So I just want to kind of put that out there. I think we got to do a very good public awareness campaign. That might be, again, 20 years from now, whenever it is, but let's just keep that. And then it's interesting, I was reading today that the models for climate change are changing and actually accelerating, not to probably anybody's surprise, but from, you know, so they just announced that today, and sea level rise, yeah, in particular, when in the article, and so I think this is going to come up sooner than later. So I just appreciate us addressing it, and that's all I got. Boom. Do we have a motion?
I move that we adopt a resolution authorizing augmentation of the fiscal year 2019-20 capital budget project number 0617 in the amount of $117,235.34 from the Parks Development Special Revenue Fund, and authorizing the city manager to execute a professional services agreement with Nichols Consulting Engineers for $137,550 to prepare the focused environmental impact report for the Poplar Beach Gateways Plan, and adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a professional services agreement with Huffman Broadway Group for $97,381 to prepare a final biological resource evaluation and wetland delineation for the Poplar Beach Gateways Plan. Can we have one vote for both?
Yeah, you can do it all in one motion. I'd suggest a roll call.
May we have a roll call vote?
Do we have a second?
I second.
Councilmember Penrose,
Aye.
Councilmember Rohrbach,
Yes.
Councilmember Ruddick,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownstone,
Yes.
Mayor Eisen,
Yes.
5-0 passes.
Excellent. Thank you guys for presenting. Great presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, hold on. All right, we are going to item 3B in our resolutions and staff reports, which is the strategic plan update. Matthew here, can give us some updating.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. It's that time of the year again. This is our quarterly update on the strategic plan, and I'm joined on the other side of the table by Colleen Latier, our communications manager. She'll be presenting some updates to this at the end of my presentation. So just by way of background, I just want to give a little background on our strategic planning and priority setting process, especially as we move into that part of the process this year for our upcoming budget. So each year we hold listening sessions with the city council and the community to gather feedback and priorities from our community. And that culminates in a public meeting. It's a community setting workshop that allows you as a council to talk about your priorities for the upcoming budget and consider all the input you received from the community, from staff, from your own work, and develop those priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. And then following that meeting, staff prepares a work plan that kind of spells out how we think we can accomplish those high-level goals in each of those priority areas. All that information is available on our website. You can see the URL there. And just as a reminder, the strategic plan consists of 3 components: our council priorities that are set each year, our capital improvement program, and our really high-level strategic elements that everything kind of falls under as we do our work. So this is an example of what our current strategic plan website looks like. It includes information on those strategic elements and then provides information on each of our council priorities each year and a history of your previous priorities and the work done around those. So for this fiscal year, back in March, you selected the following 5 strategic priorities: affordable housing, emergency preparedness, traffic and transportation demand management, sustainability, and a local minimum wage. And this is just a quick snapshot of where we're at. The dark green are items that have been completed, and the light green are items that are, moving forward as expected, we're having progress on, and just a quick way to see that. You don't have to look super close. I'll provide more on the next slide. The size 6 font. So I'm going to go through each of the priorities and just give an update. This will be your second update this year, but really the first update was shortly after the beginning of the fiscal year. So you'll see significant progress in each of these priority areas.
May I just jump in for a sec real quick?
Yeah, of course.
Can we just clarify what timeline the priorities start in and when they end, just so people have a sense that the end of the,
No, it's a great question. So you set your priorities in March, April of each year, but they're looking forward towards the budget. As we're preparing the budget, we have to understand what your priorities are going to be for the next fiscal year so we can allocate the proper resources to accomplish those goals. So you set those priorities in March. We talk about them as we do our budget workshops in May, and ultimately when we do the budget hearings in June. And then work on these really kicks off July 1st of each fiscal year. Now, some of them, affordable housing is a great example. It's been one of your priorities for several years, and we kind of look at it as a continuing process, and each year we tweak the work plan to pick up new items and new areas of focus so that we can continue to address this really important issue. And then some of them, I think minimum wage is a good example. Other than the implementation, you voted to approve the second reading tonight, which means the ordinance will go into effect next January. Most of that work will be completed before the end of the fiscal year, and we can kind of put a bow around that item and move on. And we've had several priorities over the years wrap up before the end of June of each year, and that allows you to move on to a new priority. So affordable housing, as I mentioned, has been on your list for several years. There's been a lot of different work that's been done around affordable housing. In this fiscal year, there were 3 focus areas. The first, and I think really key, was to develop a plan to utilize and replenish our affordable housing funds. We had $2 million for several years that had been obtained through, I think, a development agreement. And that money sat because we didn't have a process for distributing those funds. In this past fiscal year's budget, we added more money to that, and we had about $2.5 million, but it's still no way to distribute it. And so it was a priority of yours that we develop that plan, that approach to distributing funds so that we could start really putting that money into use. Another item that you asked us to work on was to research what are called community land trusts, options for using those here on the coast to potentially develop affordable housing, and then to consider possible tenant protection measures during this fiscal year. So an update on those items. As you know, you adopted Affordable Housing Fund allocation guidelines in December, and you made your first funding allocation at that meeting to provide funding for the Abundant Grace Workforce Development Center, which of course helps our homeless, which is in line with the priorities and the guidelines of those affordable housing funds. Talking about ways to replenish the Affordable Housing Fund, we're looking at a lot of different long-term measures, but some of the near-term sources that we've identified is a potential commercial linkage fee. And the county is actually doing a study right now on a nexus study to see if we can use those types of fees to replenish housing funds. And they actually expect to wrap that up in the next couple of months. So once that's completed, staff will review the findings and come back with some recommendations on how we might be able to implement something here to, again, start putting money back into that affordable housing fund on a regular basis. Additionally, we're looking at potentially using some of our Measure D funds that we get as we issue certificates as a way to bring some funding in on an annual basis as well. It's not a large amount of money, but it might be a nice little consistent funding source. Moving on to the community land trusts. In a previous meeting, our housing consultant presented his research and findings on it and really found that the city's role would be very limited. And so we consider that kind of the research complete. And if something changes in the legal landscape or how communities are able to use community land trusts, of course, we'll revisit it and bring it back to you.
I believe there was a joint legislative hearing on community land trusts fairly recently up in Sacramento. So the legislature is actually looking at those sorts of tools. I don't know if any legislation will appear this year, but usually, they look at it in hearings and then subsequently there's legislation developed around it. So we might see something. I don't know.
Great. That's something we'll definitely track, and we're lucky we have you to help keep track of that stuff as well. It's always on your radar. So as that moves forward, we may bring it back. But otherwise, we won't really present any more on that. Talking about the rental security measures, we were looking at residential rental security measures, and you adopted those in December. Of course, they include mediation, landlord-tenant mediation by a third-party nonprofit that can work with landlords and tenants to try to resolve issues before eviction happens, and also minimum lease terms that are consistent with AB 1482, which was recently adopted by the state. Our implementation for that includes development of educational materials both for tenants and landlords, and we're engaging with nonprofits to identify one that can provide on-call mediation services for the community. So we're looking forward to that, and we'll provide an update as that moves forward. So that's it for that work plan, but we have a few other items we just wanted to share with you around affordable housing. One is just pointing out that each year we provide our community services financial assistance grants. And this year, 25% of those funds were distributed to programs that support housing stability. So that included a workforce rental assistance program, an aging in place program, a home repair program, and critical family needs and safety net services through Coastside Hope. So that's another way you're supporting affordable housing here in the community with an existing program. Additionally, the ordinance that you approved on first reading tonight, the downtown commercial ordinance, there were several items in there that will make development of affordable housing downtown more feasible. And I think that's a really important step towards creating affordable housing here. Moving on to emergency preparedness. The work plan included updating the city's emergency operations plan, developing disaster-specific preparedness plans and city emergency communications plan, conducting emergency operations center activation exercises in collaboration with our community partners, conducting a second Coastside Preparedness Day, and CPR training for all city staff. And I will say we are a little bit behind on this particular priority. As you know, our administrative services department, where this function was previously housed, had a lot of staff turnover, and so our focus was on our day-to-day finance and HR responsibilities. Now that we have a wonderful new admin services director and a great new team there, emergency preparedness has been moved into the city manager's office, and we're going to be putting a real big focus on this moving forward. So hopefully by our next update, we've got some really great progress, but I did want to share with you some of our plans in this area. So in the past, the city has simply modified the county's emergency operations plan, which is a good plan, but it really looks at things countywide, and they were just tweaked for the local community. But as we've looked at this, we really think we need to shift away from that and create our own standalone emergency operations plan. It will interface with the county, it'll mesh with the county's plans, but it'll really be focused on the specific needs of Half Moon Bay and the coast side. And so we're reviewing samples from other jurisdictions, specifically jurisdictions that have faced some major catastrophes, the fires, landslides, some of the things we could potentially face here, and who have updated their plans based on those real life experiences. So we think there's some really great information out there that we can bring to the table and use to develop our plan. And of course, once we've kind of developed the format that we want to use and kind of the template, we'll be working very, very closely with all of our partners, other government agencies and special districts. We have so many community-based emergency preparedness groups here that we can work with. And then special community groups, we have a focused, youth outreach community that we can work with, Spanish-speaking community, and seniors. So there will be a lot of work over the next 6 months to get feedback from all those different groups to make sure we have a really comprehensive plan that is going to be effective here in case of an emergency. Talking about disaster-specific preparedness plans, what we're finding is we're looking at these other sample plans for the emergency operations plan, is they're very comprehensive. So our plan is to just move all of these types of plans, the communication plan, fire response plans, tsunami response plans, all into that emergency operations plan. So it's very comprehensive. And then talking about the emergency operations activations, during the PG&E PSPS events, Public Safety Power Shutoff events this fall, we did have the opportunity to do a soft opening of the EOC, and it's been a long time since we've needed to activate it for anything other than a special event, and that gave us a chance to look at things there. We're doing a lot of inventory of that facility and are looking forward to doing some events here in the next couple of months with our community partners so that they can get up to speed on working within the EOC as well. Additionally, as you know, during the PSPS events, the library was used by PG&E to hold a customer resource center, and we hosted a couple of them here as city staff at the Ted Adcock. I'm pleased to let you know that we have an agreement now with PG&E that they will be holding them at the library, and we're actually looking at moving those from outdoor-based events to indoor-based events. So we actually had a conversation with them today, and we're looking forward to their proposal and maybe being able to use the library much in the same way that we used the Ted Adcock last time. And the good thing about that is that leaves the Ted Adcock, which is a emergency gathering place, available should a PSPS escalate into something larger. So we're also pulling together a great team to prep for the Coastside Preparedness Day. It has been scheduled for May 2nd, so hopefully save the date, and we'll have more information coming. It was a really successful event last year. I think it was held on May 4th last year. The weather was great. The community really came out in force for the first, so we expect large crowds again, and we're looking at ways to improve upon it and really make sure that it's a beneficial event for everybody involved. And we've scheduled not only CPR training for all of our staff in the next couple of months, but several other trainings through Coastside Fire Protection District and the Office of Emergency Services to help staff be better prepared to respond to emergencies. So there's a lot of work to be done, especially around the emergency operations plan. But we got some great real-life experience during the PSPS events last year that will help kind of inform the development of our emergency operations plans. And then there's a lot of other things we're doing in the meantime to keep us moving forward on that front. So traffic and transportation demand management was another one of your priorities, and the work plan for that included the development of a TDM, or Transportation Demand Management Strategic Plan, and then develop TDM regulations, implement CIP and pedestrian and bicycle master plan projects related to TDM, and then enhance our collaboration with local and regional agencies. You've received a lot of updates and presentations on TDM over the first half of this year, so I'll keep this brief. You know that we've actually finalized and adopted our TSIP plan in November. And so the focus in this area is really on implementation of Senate Bill 743, which changes the way they measure traffic impacts. They're going to use vehicle miles traveled, as opposed to, I guess they're using what's called level of service or time-based metrics currently. And we'll be working on policies and implementation plans for that that'll go into effect July 1st of this year. Some of the projects that we're working on within the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan include the Pacific Coast Bike Path North Project, of course, the Highway 1 North and South Safety and Operations projects, Poplar Street Safety and Traffic Calming Project, and the Main Street Bridge, among others. The next round of active transportation program funding through the MTC will be released next month. And so our focus for those grant funds is going to be around projects at Highway 1 and Kelly Avenue, as it's a very active pedestrian and vehicle interface on the coast. We're also working with Stanford on an outreach program through their One Voice program. And what's cool is last meeting you received an update on the CAP, let me look what the word is, Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, and the work with our community groups that really helped gather information. So we'd like to leverage the momentum from those groups to now inform some of the work that we're doing around carpooling and active transportation and rideshare incentive programs, and then identify what programs are already in place that we can maybe do more marketing and push for here on the coast. And then, of course, we'll continue working with local agencies such as CCAG, the Transportation Authority, and the Cabrillo Unified School District to help find ways to improve transportation, especially for students finding their ways to school each day. And the district has already taken one measure, which is to eliminate some of the cross-community busing that's been happening and get kids closer to their community schools. And that'll be on our next 2x2 committee agenda. That's the meeting with a couple of council members and a couple of school board members and staff meetings. So that'll be on our next agenda, I think, in April. For sustainability, again, you've received a lot of updates on that, so I'll keep this brief. The CAP Outreach Project was funded by a grant from San Mateo County. They hosted 16 climate change-related outreach events through our community partners, and you received an update on that at our last meeting. It was, really a successful project. We now have an RFP out for a CAP writing consultant that will oversee the development of the action plan, and that will close later this month. And once we've selected someone, they'll give us, specific timelines of when that plan will be completed. But it typically takes about a year to develop those plans, and there will be additional community outreach related to the development of that plan. Back in September, you approved our green infrastructure plan, and that was submitted to the Regional Water Quality Control Board as part of our certified stormwater plan. So that's in effect, and we can make changes as needed with your approval as we move forward. We also, staff presented the final sustainability implementation plan in November, and the implementation efforts around the SIP will be divided between 3 categories: policies, programs, and projects. So under policy, staff has been tracking the county's disposable foodware ordinance, and we'll be bringing a draft ordinance or maybe a study session at one of your future meetings here shortly, so we can start talking about how we could implement that here in Half Moon Bay. We'll also be working with businesses to implement those types of plans, both just your retail and restaurant businesses, but also multifamily dwellings need assistance to comply with AB 1826, and we'll be developing an internal purchasing policy that hopefully addresses fleet electrification, which I know was a request of the council at a previous meeting. Under programs, we're developing a regular Coastside Fix-It Clinic program. These have been events held at the library most recently and been very, very successful, and they're finding there's a lot of different ways to do Fix-It clinics. Sometimes it's mending clothing, sometimes it's electronics, so they can have a different area of focus. So we're looking to make that a much more regular thing here on the coast. We're also planning our 8th annual Earth Day event, and this year's will likely be larger than those in the past and have a lot more participation from other agencies. And we're preparing for our 2nd annual scholarship contest, which is funded by Republic Services. And then as far as projects go, the focus, of course, really is to complete the CAP and be able to pursue grant funding to increase community awareness around energy resiliency. So lots of great work going on, and we just want to thank you for providing an additional staff member to help support that in Public Works. It really allows a lot of focus on sustainability on a day-to-day basis. So thank you. And then the last priority is the minimum wage ordinance. As you know, we've done a lot of work on this over the last year, and we've now got an approved ordinance that goes into effect on January 1st, so our focus will shift to implementation and enforcement. So we'll be developing educational materials for local businesses. We've been getting input from some of the downtown businesses on what questions they have and what areas that they can understand this better. And then there's some documentation we have to provide on an annual basis so they know what the minimum wage is and can post it with their legal compliance posters each year. The other thing that we're going to have to work on is how we'll do enforcement. There are agencies out there you can contract with for this, and we've got to make a determination if we want to pay someone else to do it or if it's something we can handle in-house. It'll certainly be complaint-based. So, an employee that feels like they're not being paid the minimum wage according to our ordinance would file a complaint with the city, and we'd have a process for investigating and resolving that with the employer. So before we move on to the second part of the presentation, any questions on any of the priorities and where we're at?
Council members? No? Good.
Great. Before we move on, I just want to share, we're still in the final planning stages for this year's priority setting process. We're targeting the end of this month for both English and Spanish language listening sessions and a potential targeted one at some special groups that may need help being able to attend these meetings. So we hope to have those plans finalized this week and get that information out to you and out to the community so we can really focus on outreach and getting people there so that they can start to inform our upcoming priorities in our budget process. Those, again, will be followed by a priority setting workshop where you can talk about those priorities and determine what you want to work on, have staff work on in the coming fiscal year.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to ask this on Monday when we met, but did we have our Latina outreach advisor talk to that community about the date that we were proposing?
They're circulating that right now to make sure that we have the leaders in the room, because they'll help to drive the members of the community. And so that's kind of the last piece we're waiting for before we finalize the dates. Thank you. Okay, we showed you what the updates look like and our website looks like around the strategic plan. We've heard over the last couple of years, questions and concerns about our ability to use this information to really inform the public and provide this information on a more regular basis to the public. And so we've been working with our communications department on ways to use technology and the resources that we have to provide better information to the community, more up-to-date information, and provide a place where we can point the community to so that they can keep track of some of our priorities on their own. So with me, again, is Colleen Latier, our communications manager, and she'll be showing you some of the work that she's been doing around the website. And none of it's live. We're looking for your feedback, so we're hoping there can be a little bit of discussion and some ideas from you. And if we get to a place where we think we understand what we're looking for, we'll then implement this fully so that the next time we come for an update, we'll be able to show you exactly how it's working in real time. So, Colleen.
Thank you very much, Matthew. We're just gonna pull up. So just kind of some background. So what we are using currently to build within our website, we're using OpenGov. And I know you've probably heard me talk about this before, but so OpenGov is an enterprise cloud product suite. So that's just a fancy way of saying it's just a group of products. But their specialty is specifically for government and increasing government transparency. And so we have 3 of their products. So we use them for our financial transparency tool. We have them for Open Town Hall, which is how we have been distributing surveys in the past couple of months. And we are using them for what they have called stories. So it can build websites within your web page to just demonstrate the information in a more dynamic way. And so that's kind of the way we're trying to go with that, because when you look at the original strategic plan page, it's very static and it's just a list of what the elements and priorities are, and it doesn't really give you a deep dive that you're looking for about what each priority is. And so that's kind of the direction that we're going in, to make these pages living documents that we're updating on a regular basis so that people can access this information whenever they want. So our first stab at this is the updated City Council strategic plan mock-up. And so it gives it the overview of what this page is, and we believe that the priorities should be the main focus, because that is what you set, that you're listening to the community, that they really want to hear, what they respond to. And so in theory, these would be clickable. One of them is, but that comes later. And so that way people can click into each one of these pages and will be presented with the most up-to-date information about each one of these topics. And that way, again, a living, breathing document, where that way we're not waiting for a quarterly update so that people can have access to this information at any time. And then additionally, it includes the capital improvement program, and then an overarching just message about the strategic elements and what they are. And then this is clickable and will take you to what the list of the strategic elements. And this page will also be updated and changed as well. And so, an example of clicking in, we chose sustainability because, major priority. And so that will take you to a deep dive of sustainability page. So again, we really want these to be very dynamic, very time sensitive. So anything that is new, that's happening, that'll be the first thing that you see, so that people just know right off the bat, hey, this is what's happening in the world of sustainability, this is what the city is doing, this is what the county is doing. And then you scroll down, you get some background on, why this priority was chosen, the purpose of it, why it matters, and then you go down. This is not Half Moon Bay data, just so you know. This would include, data that we've gathered from the work that we've done and how it relates specifically to the coast side. And then we have the work plan, which is kind of the milestones that have been happening throughout, the year, and we're marking those as well. So again, in theory, each page would each priority would have its own page, and then we would be updating it with the most pertinent information to that priority. And this is another level of transparency that we're just trying to create for the public and the community, and it would make it easy to share to the community. So we can just share all of this on our outreach channels, social media, our e-news, and we can just directly drive people to these pages so that they can find out. Yes. So, to an extent, so say that we were actually going to run a survey for one of the priorities. If we were to integrate, we use Open Town Hall, we can integrate that survey into this page, and people can actually, what they respond can be live, and it can be public. So it does create a forum for people to interact with one another on. So that's one way of doing that. But besides that,
I think another way that this can become interactive is you see on here right now, it's just, I'm trying to scroll, but I don't have any control over this. Farther down the page, there were kind of the sample data points. So one of the great things, the most powerful things about this tool is its ability to integrate into live data sources. As we go in and implement our new ERP system, our new financial and planning system, they will be able to interface at some point. And so you might have some live financial data, or there might be maps with information about specific projects. And the tools are built into this software that you can create those more interactive pieces that people can click. And the idea, I think, is, especially with that news feed at the top, is people go here if they just want to know what the city's working on, and they can see the most pertinent and up-to-date information. But if they're more interested in learning more, they can dig in, at different levels. They can go through and start clicking on the data and exploring the data. There will be links to other information sites. They can look at these summary paragraphs, which is all we've ever provided previously, if they really want to understand everything that we've been doing and are doing in this area. So it kind of allows each level of user the experience that they need, whether it's just a quick glance or a little bit more information, interactivity, or a deep dive to really understand what we're doing.
I think that platform does allow for, let's say, notifications if there's like updates to a piece, right? So you can provide your email, and if there's an update like to a financial plan or something else, then you get a notification.
Subscribe to a story?
I'm wondering if the financial portion of it might. So I'd have to look into that, so I can get back to you definitely on what levels of interactivity there can be for all the different suites.
Cool. Thank you. It's been my experience that a lot of these wonderful web plans sort of deteriorate after a while because nobody keeps them up, really. So I think I'm pleading that there be somebody, Colleen.
I'm happy to.
Who makes it a large fraction of his or her workload to actually keep this thing current. Otherwise, it quickly, in my experience, becomes obsolete.
Exactly, and then the pages do become stale, but we've had this conversation, we had this conversation with Bob and Matthew, and we understand that is, it can happen, but we understand the importance of this, and staff does as well, and so it will be our priority to make sure that.
And will there be some informal mechanism for input from the council? For example, when we see something that we'd like to change, can we request that from a webmaster or somebody who's maintaining these pages?
I think part of the reason the strategic plan is housed in the city manager's office is we are that kind of central hub within the city. We know what's going on in each department. We hear about things that are going on, and we already think this way, but we'll add that to our cap, that we always need to be thinking about how does this impact the priorities in the strategic plan? And has something happened that we need to get in here and get out to the public? And of course, in our regular meetings with you, that's a great opportunity, I think, to talk about those things. And the nice thing about this product is it's so quick and easy to change that it's not a major undertaking to make a modification or to add something new. It's really very quick and easy. I've worked with a similar product at the county, and it just made those updates so much easier and prevented that staleness that keeps people from coming back and looking at it, right? If you want people to look at it, it needs to be interactive, it needs to be updated, it needs to have information that gives a person a reason to come back and look. So those are all great comments. Thank you.
I did have another comment. I think it's a great platform. And yeah, there's always the ongoing question of who will administer all this. So when you come up with a thing about it being interactive, there's always that question, who the heck's going to answer the questions? So, but from the dynamic side, I love the idea that allows for, if we can make it dynamic, where the community is educated on, well, how can I get involved? And there's certain strategic areas where that's really lends itself. Emergency preparedness, sustainability, so emergency preparedness. You know, we could put in a little video of a beach cleanup, right? I mean, that's been expanding geometrically, people getting involved with that. We have a CERT program, which should probably be one of the metrics that we have, because it's almost like ongoing in parallel. City Council member Penrose was able to get a great grant for it. There's money. More and more people are being trained. And it brings that COSIDE Preparedness Day, which we do once a year for everyone, it brings it down to a local level, the CERT training. We're having like neighborhood fairs now, right, where people, which are being really well attended. So what a great platform for showing people, yeah, this is what happens here. This is what happens if you do a CERT training. This is the knowledge you'll have, you know? Yeah, you could learn CPR, and by the way, there's hands-only CPR. You know, people don't, there's all kinds of interesting things going on that people would say, wow, that'd be great to know. Because in an emergency, in each neighborhood, it could be that a lot of stressful things happening all at once. We have ham radio people. There's so many interesting things going on, and then we could figure out for the other elements where we could keep it dynamic. So, and I'd be glad to, you know, help out with some of that stuff as well.
Definitely.
So this is great. Thanks for really working with that platform, and I think it'll really enhance community involvement in education.
Yes, I agree.
And the other nice thing is, as we finish a priority, some of these priorities, even when they're finished, are obviously just ongoing projects. It's very simple now to transfer that page to a living, breathing page on our website that's no longer a priority page. It's just where you go for information. So it'll reduce redundancy of, you know, re-entering stuff and rebuilding stuff. So we're really excited about this platform and how we can use it for things like, you know, capital improvement project tracking, planning project tracking, all those things. So this will be an iterative process. We're really looking forward to your feedback on this and really honing this and making it a useful tool for the community. So thank you.
So I'm excited, and we'll get to the card in just a second, but is this a new product that we just purchased? And if so, well, just answer that part first, I guess.
We have purchased it in June, this portion of it. So we've had the financial transparency portal, I believe, since maybe 2015, I think. But we purchased the Open Town Hall, which is the survey tool, and Stories as a bundle in this past June.
And then is that something that is like a one-time purchase? Do we pay for it each month? Just out of curiosity, so I have a sense of and the reason I'm going for all this is I'm going back to what Councilmember Rarback said, which is, and I'm not saying that this is going to be one of them, but we have had a history of I don't even know how to say it in the right words, but it hasn't rolled out as thoroughly, let's just say, as maybe we would like to see. And so if there's cost associated, if we have the right staffing level, like, I definitely want to make sure that we activate on this one.
It's cloud-based, so it's a subscription. I don't know.
Yeah, it's
how
an
often we
annual.
pay. One of the things that's cool is OpenGov is a company based out of Redwood City, so the customer service is really, really high for us. We've met with them at face-to-face several times, and they're really interested in, really showcasing their product locally, as they go out to the rest of the world. I mean, they've been around a long time. I've worked with them when I was at the county several years ago. But the customer service level is high, and they're constantly adding new tools and ways to use this. So we're really hopeful about this being able to be used more robustly on the website and be really effective.
Can we go to the speaker card? Or you guys cool with that? To the speaker card.
Roy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Just a brief comment. As one of the owners of the Half Moon Bay Review, we get a lot of hits on our online version of the paper. There may be an opportunity to share some quality data. We are always looking for quality information, quality data. So if this tool has a component that we could work with or incorporate on our website, I think you would get many more eyeballs looking at it. So I throw that out. I don't know how that would work. We've spent a lot of time revamping our online presence, so there may be an opportunity to collaborate, and we would love to showcase whatever you produce. Thank you.
Excellent. Nice to have this representative in the audience here. Thank you. Anything else from council on this item? Okay, excellent.
So it feels like or Bob, did you?
No, go ahead.
It just feels like we're on the right track here, which is exciting. So we'll really roll this out over the next couple of months, and we'll let you know as that progresses. And at our next update, maybe our next update will just really be kind of doing some of that exploration and getting some feedback from you, because you'll have access to that information all along. So that's the other thing we hope, is that maybe it helps facilitate better updates, so it's not kind of this quarterly, talk through things that half of them you've already heard. Maybe it's more dynamic as well. So we're excited, and we'll move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I just wanted to add and acknowledge Matthew and his staff and Jessica and Colleen for coming up with this. I don't know if you made the connection, but I'll make it for you. So since I've been here now a little over a year, this is something that you individually and collectively, I think, have brought up to me on several occasions. I've gotten feedback about how we bring back our quarterly reports, how we show you what we're doing towards the priorities that you have created, how you can hold me and the staff accountable to actually completing the things that are associated with the priorities. So it's come up a lot. And so for me, it was, you get asked once, twice, okay, I got to talk to staff about it, as any good city manager would. So then I go to my staff meeting and say, hey, we got to do more here, shake my fist a little bit. Let's step this up. And then that was it. And they worked on this, and I don't hear anything more about it. And then they come back to me and say, voila, what do you think? And so I just wanted to acknowledge them, that they just took this and ran with it, and I think it really is impressive. And the two real points that were made that I think are important, Councilmember Brownstone just starting to kind of spitball ideas. Yeah, there's all kinds of different ways we could take this. The old-fashioned way of just having like 4 bullet points saying we're working on this, we're working on this, we're working on this, we've made progress. We can do so much more than that. There's so much more going on under the heading of sustainability, the heading of transportation, than the 4 bullet points we give you. There are those everyday things, going to meetings, and we can show photos of that and communicate that. So that's point number 1. And then the ownership, we get that. We had that conversation. We do have the master here, and then we're really going to make sure that each priority, many people touch the priorities, obviously, it's a team effort, but in terms of ownership for updating and communicating, each one will have an owner. So not everyone may become versed in how to keep this up, but one person for each priority will, and they'll work with Colleen to make sure that it doesn't become stale. So I just wanted to make those 2 points and acknowledge these guys.
Just one thing to add to that, Bob. I know, we're always reminded that it's our responsibility as a city council to set the priorities. And this kind of communication, the buck should stop with elected officials and city council if things go right or if things go wrong. So this kind of communication and making it more accessible and interesting and dynamic for constituents also ends up holding our feet to the fire, which is good. Like, hey, we said we did this, and here's some of the stuff, and maybe some of this looks like window dressing and others doesn't. And I mean, that's normal in life with government and interacting with its city. But this allows, I think, for the dialogue to be more robust. I love the word dynamic, and it holds us accountability. So yeah, careful what we ask for. We're going to be more accountable when this thing takes off. So it's great. Appreciate it.
I just have one tip. I would just worry about having, really large blocks of uninterrupted text. Just make sure that,
Not too wordy.
Well, I like the idea, like you said, of having more information and more vital information. I just know, I've been going through a bunch of websites recently, scientific things, and big blocks of text, uninterrupted, like no heads.
We love pictures.
We do.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I love writing just text.
Yeah.
That's what staff lives for.
I mostly love reading just so much text, right before bed, when I need something to put me to sleep, just look at a government website.
Right.
But
I
not
feel that.
us.
2 thumbs up.
We're with you.
All right, excellent. Thanks for the report, and hopefully a great opportunity for the public to be more involved as well with the website, to have a good sense of what's going on. All right, City Commission and committee staff updates. I think that's probably, we don't have any today? Matthew? No? Good. Future discussion, possible agenda items? All right, hearing none, beautiful. City council reports? Hearing none. We are adjourning the meeting. Congratulations. Well done, everybody.
All right.